All right, everyone, 5 after. I think we can go ahead and get things started. For those of y'all that haven't met me yet, I'm Rachel. I'm part of the OrthoLink Scholars team, and I'm also on the SAOAO board. And so just a few announcements before we really kick things off. OrthoLink Scholars officially has a YouTube. So I've been uploading all of our previous chats to our YouTube page, and it will also go up on our website. So stay tuned on Instagram for the official launch and mass blast about that information. And this will also be going up on there as soon as possible. And so without further ado, thank y'all for being here for Resilience and Rebound with Dr. Albert Musad. We are just so grateful for his incredible story and insight on this topic. It is very, very under-discussed and something that we kind of wish never happens, but it's a reality that we all need to make sure we think about and we plan for. Preparation is always a good thing. So without further ado, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome, thank you. So how y'all doing? Thank you for coming out this night. So my name's Albert. I'm one of the new interns at the Geisinger in the Northeast program. Just regarding right now, and we're in the weeds with orientation. So I have a little bit of time to share my story and a lot of things that I learned over the last year about, maybe not matching the first time, but successfully going through the cycle this year. So without further ado, let's get to it. So just a little more background about myself. Boston born and raised, and thought I'd actually stay there really the entirety of my life. But life obviously had other plans. It's kind of brought me to a lot of places I never thought I'd be. Brought me to South Florida, and now into Northeast Pennsylvania, both places I've really come to enjoy. But yeah, right after high school, I went to Tufts for undergrad, went to study biochem and psych there as a double major, and then I stayed in that area for Tufts for medical school. And then, as you might assume, didn't match the first time, and I got a really nice gig out in South Florida in Boca Raton at the Paley Institute, doing a lot of shoulder research with the Dr. Jonathan Levy. He's been fantastic and continues to be fantastic as a mentor. And now I've started residency in Geisinger, which is also an incredible program and really focuses on the learner as well as the service you do in without throughout orthopedic residency. And then another thing, I knew personally that I wanted to do ortho from the get-go. I know people throughout medical school find their calling at different stages, whether you come into med school knowing what you want to do or make a last second switch in third year. So for me, I haven't thankfully wavered since the end of M1, and obviously I've made it here. And before I go into the next, I just have a few slides just to ground this presentation, but and more so about a few comments about not matching. So as you all are very much aware, the number of applications continues to go up. While there are new residencies that are popping up as well, there's no way they're matching the continuing growing interest. So it is a curve that's ever going to become more competitive. So as unfortunate as it might be, we have to think logically and realistically that, even people on this call might not match the first time. And I pray that doesn't happen to any of y'all, but it's not really that match day that, it's going to be seared in your memory that's going to define you. It's going to be your response in those weeks and months immediately after that's going to be the difference maker. Throughout the whole process, you have to stay focused. You got to be optimistic with that, that real journey that you're going to have ahead of you. There's a lot of people that are qualified and honestly overqualified candidates that are shocked that they don't match each year. And that numbers game, is very real. It's getting tighter than ever. And the thing that at least I heard a lot early on, which drove me mad, and I think a lot of people who are in similar boat can say they heard is, you fell through the cracks, which is clearly, from a lot of people who are saying it, it's probably coming from a loving place, trying to comfort you, saying like, okay, it wasn't you. And it is a system failure. But when you are in the situation, you're asking PDs of places you rotate at, home PDs, mentors that know you. You want the most critical feedback. You want the rough thing. You don't want them to worry about your feelings. You want them to really just help you improve your application. And that sometimes requires a hard truth because there's always something you can improve. So when you hear that question, why didn't you match? Your response shouldn't be, oh, yeah, they got unlucky. No, like there's always something you can improve. So a very common question, and obviously a question that I faced from early on, was prelim versus research year. Because now you obviously thought you'd have a few months off in fourth year and start planning to move and then start residency for 5 years. Suddenly, you don't know what the next step is. So this is before going to like all the anecdotes and my own thoughts. This has been something that's well studied. There's this JBJS open access is a few years old, but shows that there's no really difference in the final outcomes between prelims and research years for those who've taken them in terms of their ultimate match results. There's a few other JBJS open access that kind of spring and cite this paper, looking into the more fine details of AOA, number of research items of those who reapplied and matched. But those are getting a lot into the weeds, and a lot of it's common sense. But it's good to know that there is some evidence-based research behind it. In general, people say research here is ideal for those who need research as that final missing piece, um, but are great on paper everywhere else. Versus prelim year is a great option for those who may want to highlight their clinical skills. Maybe they like got unlucky in a few research rotations in third year and fourth year, and not getting honors or feel like it was more subjective, but they know they're great doctors. You have that whole year to kind of leave that impression. Now going to more of my thoughts. Prelim years, if you're faced with decision, uh, are almost exclusively going to come through SOAP, especially if you didn't do apply. My first year, I did not do apply, and my second year, I did do apply, but only with Gen Surg prelim. When you do apply, that's I think that's a different conversation, but you can do apply with a prelim year in IM. Gen Surg is by far the most common prelim, or you can just apply to another categorical. So entirely something that you may have a different path at that point. Um, but within the match week that first time, it's really difficult to make that decision because everything is moving at the speed of light. So it's something like no matter how secure you feel, you may have like 25 interviews, you may be like told that you're ranked to match with like five places. I would generally spend the time to be honest with yourself and decide what you would do before that Monday morning. So God forbid you don't hear good news, you know exactly what to do. A few more details about the that process. Nothing I hope you guys have to look into right now. You only get 45 programs total. There are almost never open ortho PGY1 spots. Um, so you can kind of decide again if you this is me assuming that you're still ortho, which for me was like a 10-second kind of decision. That was never really my debate, but I know a lot of people do have to consider that for a number of different factors. Um, whether it's financial at that point, they may have been in school for a lot of years and want to get paid a real residence salary. We'll talk about how research here might give you a little less money, but a little more free time, or just like the stage of life is like, they kind of just want to progress, even if maybe not ortho. Um, but yeah, I would definitely try. There's a few things that have happened over the last few years. Um, I think Brown has opened a prelim spot that mimics the ortho intern year exactly. So you actually do 6 months of ortho within that prelim. So stuff like that do pop up in SOAP. So always being aware. And then doing your research to see if the prelim slots are available. Do they typically take, do the home institution typically take their prelims into their ortho program? There are definitely a few that are well known to be taking their prelims, whether it's because the director did the same path or otherwise. Um, it's just that constant communication. And again, this is all in the span of 2, 3 days. So you're going to keep your phone ringer off on rather, and you're going to keep open the entire time. Another thing, at least for me, you're going to be scouring websites like Reddit, and you're going to be talking to mentors, you're going to be calling the PDs, and this will all help you get a lot of context on the situation and give you a lot of information like what I'm doing now. But your end ultimate decision is going to be completely personal. If you're going to want someone to tell you this is the right thing, it's going to give you a lot more confidence in that decision, but this is really specific to you, completely case by case. So even if you hear like a great success story of someone that's really similar to you, it just may not be your situation. Um, Again, you got to decide first, is it still worth or pivoting somewhere else? Um, you'll hear a lot of opinions when you talk to a lot of people. So I think there is an upper limit to how many people you should be sharing and talking to. Because I've heard, maybe I did a little too much, but I've heard PDs who really want you to focus on your clinical acumen. A lot of people are like, okay, you can do as much research out of a zoo, but if you're not a good doctor and good person, like I don't really care. So a lot of them actually like the prelim year in that regard because you kind of prove yourself, like, you're going to be a good provider. But other ones are just really emphasizing the network and like there's a lot of benefits to research here from networking to getting your name out there, helping that institution. So yeah, you're never going to please everybody. So be prepared. Like you'll go to an interview, even if you get there, you'll be like, oh, you should have done a prelim year. Or another place is like, oh, you should have done a research year. Prepare to answer that question of why you chose what you did, and again, why you didn't match. Between these two, another thing is delaying graduation. You can't really do that with the prelim year because you have to get your MD and start license, get a license to start practicing. But delaying a graduation, if it's not an option, really defeats a lot of the benefits of research year. And if you are going research year, it's almost a necessity nowadays. A few benefits with that, ERAS will show you as a senior in medical school rather than a graduate of medical school, which is could be a possible filter. I don't think anyone really screams how they do filter their applications from program to program. It's not a well-known thing. It's not on ORIN, but it is something people talk about. It may also allow you to do additional ways. So if you are thinking about that research here, bring that up in the conversation with that mentor early is really important because that'll be a month out of 12 months. So that mentor should expect that, or maybe they have a well-known infrastructure to allow you to do that, or maybe this is the first time they're like thinking about it. In addition to that, I got lucky because the malpractice insurance also was intact during my delay. So I delayed graduation, sorry. And that will allow you to just scrub in at additional places too, especially if they have a agreement with your school. So even if it's not a formal rotation, kind of like you can do with your home institution where you can just a shadow or possibly scrub in after you do scrub and training that it's just more FaceTime with the attendings that, are ultimately going to write your letters of recommendation. Another thing that I did, I asked a lot about how it show up on my transcripts. Because some places they have actually research programs that they kind of funnel you in. So it's not even shown as a leave absence. Some of them say leave absence and they give a description. Some of them just say leave absence, which probably is where you're going to get the most questions. Like, what is that? But I think when you reapply, you shouldn't hide the fact that you're a reapplicant. So again, working with schools to strategize the final rotations logistics, really important. Always remain open to everything because again, if you're taking a post fourth year research year and you don't take those rotations, I think you're at a major disadvantage, especially if your research institution doesn't have its own home program. And then something that I learned, not the hard way, but the thing I don't like to say too much is
On the way.
your medical deans at your medical school are fantastic. They know your logistics, they help you a ton, and you can't do this process without them. But not all of them are orthopedic surgeons or have that kind of program director background within orthopedics. So they may not know as much about the reapplication process. Obviously, a ton of most med schools have people applying to orthopedics. But again, the directors are probably a little more helpful in terms of the specific stuff kind of what I touched on before as well, and look at this comparison, the financial aspect in two regards. On yourself, like I think almost everywhere you get paid less in a research year, maybe just a handful of really big institutions, you get paid a little more than a PGY1. But there's also a lot of unpaid research years versus in a prelim year, you're getting the standard PG1. That's guaranteed. So if it's like a phase of life where you just need to start making an income, whether you're, starting to think about family or otherwise some other situation, that can play a factor. It did for a lot of my friends. But on the flip side, you're getting paid less in a research year. A little bit, you got to make it. You make the most of it, and you make it what you want. But you do have a lot more free time. You can use that free time to work on more projects, work on other initiatives, and build a new hobby. But I think comparing that to a prelim year, you have a load of more free time. And then there's also a financial aspect on the program. Some PDs have brought this up when I talked about it, where the funding from CME is not the same for someone who already done that prelim year. So if you've already done the prelim year, this is something I only heard from a few PDs. I didn't find it much of anywhere else. They don't get as much money. So if it's a new program and they're really considering, money might be tight or it's somewhere where money is just tight from the get-go, they might be looking for someone straight out because they get the same amount of funding for those residents, but they're not going to get the same funding if you did that intern year. Now you're pretty much repeating the intern year at their institution. So I'm talking about picking a researcher because that's the path I went down. Ideally, if you find a place that has a residency with it, that's fantastic. Take advantage of it, but know that every single day is an interview. Like you have absolutely 0 days of slacking because you know that's going to be the one day in the 365 that like the PD and like the new attending, everyone like was looking for you, and like that's your first impression. First impressions matter so much. That's literally what the first thing our chair told us on the first day of orientation. It's like whenever you have a time period with somebody, the first third of that time period is where you leave the most impact. And no matter what you do in the second 2/3, what they're going to remember is that what you did in the beginning. Um, so again, while great, and there are a lot of places that have historical track records of matching their research years into their program, um, they're also, with how competitive it is, they have no reason not to look at everyone else. And if you're not really up to their standard, they're happy to take someone else. A lot of the highly desirable research years may already be filled by match day. So keep an eye on OrthoGate because everyone knows this timeline. Everyone knows it's Monday of match day. People are going to post a ton of them. OrthoGate, if you don't know, is this online kind of like forum place where it's really just used for med student research year opportunities at this time or research fellowships. Just they list the requirements, they list an email, read the requirements, see if they need maybe a personal statement, a letter of recommendation, a cover letter. They might need your step one and step two reports. They're all on rolling basis as well. So trying to get out those applications ASAP to as wide as you can. And you can, the earlier the better, you can have a lot more choices. But also keep on it even beyond that because there's a lot of students who may have accepted position in December or January and actually backed out of it. So there may be a highly sought after position that actually ends up being open, and they'll see like now open or they repost what they did. Um, I don't think there's any way to set up the notifications on the website, but they are something like I would just check on my phone at least during that first week. What else? A lot of them have different format. There's nothing standardized, which sucks. But so you might get an offer and you might feel like, oh, it's not, I could do better. And you might like I had two offers of different research years before I took the one I did take. And it felt super hard because it's very something tangible, something you had in your hand and you're saying no to. And honestly, by the end of the match week, I felt very uneasy not having my fate kind of known. But I think it worked out for the best. Two things in addition for that kind of research application process is that you might have a few interviews. It's not really just reading and accepting. It's you might have a phone screen with the current research fellow and then an actual interview with the attending. Both more important, but nowhere as high pressure as the residency interview. So, just be yourself, be real, tell them when you can come, tell them that your expectations, and really just kind of read that attending and how they could be a mentor to you. Having your own mentors reach out to the research year if like it's at their buddy's institution does help, kind of like residency. It's some people ask for letters of recommendation, but if they know like the chair at your institution or the person you did research with, that's going to also help and push you to, okay, I'm going to take him and I can close out my application for my research year. For me, picking a research mentor was, I think, where I ultimately had the most success in, and probably I'm very thankful for him. Rather than having that research institute, a lot of people say NYU, and like there's a ton of research fellows at NYU. People say Rush, people say Stanford, people say a ton of UCSF, like a ton of great places that are actually fantastic, but they're just so much difference. And I chose a place that doesn't even have a home program for a residency, and that's how much I really actually believed in that mentor. I was told I was taking a massive risk, but I had some background in the research he did, and I knew the quality of that research and infrastructure of that research. And it may not be that big of a name institution, um, but I had every opportunity to get as many first authors as I want. There was not as much competition. There was actually only one fellow, so I kind of had the control of everything, which was fantastic. And I think when it comes to the interviews, a lot of people know better and can see right through the big name institution and see what you actually did. You could have been like one gear in like this massive turning machine, or you could have been like the entire research department. Dr. Lee would just point at me and like, that's our research department. I was like, okay, cool. That's not my name, but yes, functionally, like every email, everything was going through me, which is again a lot. It's not every situation, and I think some people may not like that. But for me, it worked out really well. Again, very case by case uh, basis. I found I really liked my research mentor a lot because he matched my enthusiasm and ambition. So whenever I had a paper idea, he had like two more, like the offspring, and like we would get them done in like weeks rather than months, to order of years. Um, Also, I found someone who I was not afraid to ask a ton of questions, and I really wasn't afraid to ask about anything. Before my stint at this research year, he'd had 10 years of research fellows. Not a single one asked him to stay in the OR consistently weekly. So we developed this whole kind of clinical kind of side to the research here. And I also had malpractice insurance and I also delayed graduation. That also kind of eased some fears in the get-go in the beginning. Um, but it really added so much to my research here. Um, so yeah, always ask because you never know. I asked like when he got an email about writing a book chapter, I literally just replied, "Can I write it?" He said, "Yeah, go for it." If I was interested in going to a place for a conference, he almost never said no. But I think if you didn't have that relationship with the research mentor, you almost like would be fearful of asking. You'd just be surprised how many times people say yes. And I think a lot of people, again, when you go to those big institutions, you can be like, okay, there's like five big names here. I wouldn't worry about the number of mentors. You just have three minimum letters of recommendations. You just want to have that go-to person. That really can, that anyone can be your mentors and like beyond that. You can have people who like, maybe you update once a week versus people you update like every day, pretty much if you see them every day versus, like you only reach out when there's like a question. Um, a lot of mentoring relationships have different they come in a lot of ways, shapes and forms. So just if you're looking for like, that like rock, you might not get that in every single person on a mentor. So again, a few things. All research years are not equivalent. You want to look at the number of research fellows. I got one, but I think honestly two might have been the sweet spot because there's a lot of times where I was either on a rotation or interview that I was like, nothing's going on because I can't do it. Uh, Asking about the prior research fellow success is also really important. Like Dr. Levy has had 100% success matching his fellows, which is God will only keep for many years. But that's also something that, maybe they might hide if it's not stellar, but you should be expecting to, you want to go to somewhere where they expect you to match and like they historically do match people into ortho as well. Clinical experience we talked about. And then again, some places, if you're in a bigger department, you can probably get one or two letters. I obviously had one main mentor at my research year, and he was the one letter. I kept a lot of letters from the last year, thankfully, because I have a home program. I know everyone's not as no, not everyone has that benefit. Just knowing where you're going to get the additional letters if you maybe have just one main research mentor. If there's like a second mentor who also does a lot of research, keeping that FaceTime open too. Another thing I considered during my research year was the type of research. That's going to matter because if you're doing this after your fourth year, and you're trying to reapply that actual same cycle, that's really just a matter of a few months. So you have pretty much from when you start to mid-September to have a meaningful improvement in your application, which, it is, a few months so you can actually do something with it. But I don't think you're going to start like a FDA trial. You're not going to start a basic science like big paper. Maybe you can help on the tail end of one thing, and if you get lucky and you've actually done enough work on it, you can get on it. But there's nothing you're going to really start and finish in that time frame. That's going to be a lot of prospective, or a clinical or basic science kind of big trial. So at least for me, there's a lot of retrospective work that's done, a lot of case reports, a lot of video techniques. There's a lot of stuff that I knew I can get done really quick in that research year, and that I think helped with the bulkness of research. And then obviously you need to know what you're talking about too. At least for me, I saw a lot of people starting July 1st, June 1st, and I was kind of surprised because that's leaving, a lot of months on the table. And obviously, I do think a lot of us need a little bit of a break, but at least for me, living in Boston, now moving to South Florida, I was down there within 4.5 weeks. The limiting factor was getting an apartment. And I think, everyone sees stuff like that, even though you think it might not go unnoticed. Um, People will see that and see how driven you are. And, it's not really the time to take an extended vacation at all. But I also understand life factors play a role too. Discernment and reapplication. I think like I kind of said this before, there's always something can improve. If you go into the interview and when they ask you what you did differently and you said, not much, I just gave, like, I just shot it again and maybe I hit the bullseye this time, you're playing it up but by chance and you're saying it's a numbers game and you kind of didn't evolve. You want to refocus your goal, refocus your aim, and don't undersell yourself, but also be realistic. I think this, and mostly in the sense of where you're applying to. I think a lot of people fall for the come fit fall of like top 25, and that's their 25 or 30 signals. And then, they'll apply to other places, but feel like, okay, yeah, I'm good enough. But no, almost every program can fill with people who rank them number one, I think, at this point. Like there's so many people and so many interested qualified candidates that that's not the way to approach it. Um, what else? I think a big thing for me as well during the reapplication was not only looking how well I performed and presented myself during interviews. The interviews, I think, is something people don't talk about as much because people assume like they already have one foot in if they perform well in their rotation, they look great on paper. But the interviews, I think, completely botch some people's application. Like I've heard of people going from like their favorite to the do not rank a number of times. And then the opposite where like, okay, they were just average, but their personality like won them. So I think when I hear people talking about what they changed in the year, I don't hear as many people talking about I just worked really hard on interviewing because I think there's a lot of great people who just like on the day the pressure gets to them or like they fumble on the words and they just don't present them well so as well. So I think if maybe you do think like you fell through the cracks and there's nothing on paper, your application in terms of a deficit in your application, really focusing on how you present yourself is going to be critical because that it may just be the final piece to find success this time. Um, Another tip that I did, I really honed in on the networking and genuinely reaching out to residents and connections. I think I got lucky because I got someone who is in a research mentor who's really connected in the world of shoulder and elbow. And there's a good number of shoulder elbow PDs, a good number of shoulder elbow faculty almost everywhere. And they're usually the one or two um, dedicated faculty to shoulder and elbow at their institution. So like everyone kind of knows them for and they're not just like another surgeon. So they were great connections because I have him. He'd hit up someone, they'd hit up the PD, or they were the PD, or they were the chair, and I'd generally spend a solid 15 to an hour, depending on the day, every day, trying to send an email or two. And you really want to be careful in that, not being too generic, because you could also send an email to 100 places in 5 minutes. You can misspell everyone's institution or just not mention it. Again, people can read right through that. It is very obvious. But yeah, I think reaching out to the directors and coordinators early with genuine stuff, maybe you find someone from your school went there and you talked to them already before reaching out to the PD. Maybe you found some other connection that you want to explore more. But again, really just being honest and throughout that. And then most importantly, life goes on no matter what. You demonstrate your perseverance and enthusiasm at every opportunity you get. Whether that you're able to do one or two more weight rotations or not, you're gonna run into people, especially if you're at these institutions or nearby. You'll run into residents, attendings, directors at conferences too. Respect everybody. Expect like as if they are, not only family but also the person deciding on your application because they'll remember you for like, oh, that's the guy who like ate that salad so messily at one conference and like, oh, we see him like it is the strangest things that people will remember you for. And hopefully it's always something good. Um, at least for me, again, I kind of started saying I was born and raised in Boston, and for me, like there was a location preference early on. But I think through this whole process, not only do I have a much more global vision of everything, but keep those location preferences pretty light if you can. Again, a ton of life circumstances may prevent you from doing so, but that could be just the one thing that's holding you back as well. Um, there's something to be appreciative about literally everywhere. Like even if you like, oh, you don't want to be in the Midwest, you're gonna find something you're gonna love and like a new hobby that you never thought. You like almost everyone falls in love with where they ends up, some way or another. Don't psych yourself out. Trust yourself. Trust your support system, and always be thankful and grateful for what you get to do, and don't take for granted. So that's most of my thoughts. I went through some of the Q&As. I only got a handful, but I'll just write the one or two thoughts and read the question first. So, one question was, how important would you say class rank and first and second years grades are in matching? So it's completely dependent on the school and the program. Some programs, when they don't have something from every single person, because this is again like some people pass fail first and second year. Some people are graded in a let with a letter grade. They will discount that information and really just take the standards that are across the board. So something they can actually compare. Other places they see it and they be like that might predispose them. And there's other places where the school itself will not really give that information. At least for me, for my school, we have an MSP, so it's pretty much what the deans write to the directors about your performance during school at their institution. And for me, the entirety of those first 2 years are in a sentence that's no more than 7 words long. Like it's like past all all pre-clerkship requisites. That's literally it. And literally all the pain and suffering was completely gone in this. That's captured by that one sentence. So ask your deans if you don't know already. And I say that, it doesn't hurt, but I think more and more often with people trending, a lot of med schools trending to pass fail, it's just a lot of program directors see it as being unfair to compare data that they don't have with someone person and data they may have with someone else. So a lot of them will again focus on step two, focus on your away rotation and letters recommendation, and if you do have the third year grades, we'll focus on that. How did you weigh research here for PG1 year at all? Any recommendations for prelim years trying to make connections when they can't rotate with ortho during their intern year? We talked about the research versus prelim year. If you can't rotate during your prelim year, if you're at an institution that has ortho, it's obviously a tough spot. Hopefully you can communicate that pretty early. A lot of prelim places A know that you're gonna stay there only for 1 year. They know that more likely than not, unless you convert to Gen Surge or convert to that specialty, and they like you enough to match you in their categorical position, they want you to succeed as well. There are maybe a few bad apples. That use you as a workhorse, but across the board, you should have the assumption and ask them how they're going to help you. So if you be after that, you're still not able to rotate with ortho during that year. You try to connect with that ortho program again if that's at the institution in any way you can. You want to reach out early and often to the program director and the coordinator and just let them know what you're trying to do. They'll be aware of you. Um, see, at least if you're in the days, you see if there's like a trauma OR somewhere that you can go after your clinical duties, so you're still being faithful to your true program, your the program you're at right now and the prelim, but also showing that it's going to suck a little more, but obviously it's going to be worth it. Joining for journal clubs, ran rounds, really whatever you can kind of bite on, like any little ounce that they can give you, just take it. Then you got to make sure that you're in good standing with both, that ortho program. It's not like someone who's like, who's this? So they know who you are and they know why you're coming, but also your own program that they don't feel like you push them to the side. What specific steps prove that I strengthened my CV, new publication, sub-I leadership? I think there's not one thing that kind of proves that your CV is now strong. I think obviously more pubs, more awards is always nice, but it's what you expand on in an interview when people ask you. It's just really more material that for people to talk about, which is like is always great because you never want to awkward silence in an interview or any interaction really. But if you can show how interested or how like impactful that research is, or that volunteer role, that's what makes the strongest CVs because that's what their people are going to think about. Okay, the one or two things on the CV that they talked about in an interview rather than reading it, which they did not read. Again, and hopefully that if you really strengthen your CV, that corresponds to a lot of strength in your letters of recommendation. Where, again, if you have a very strong CV, you might be put in a different pile than everyone else, like a little favored, but and within that pile, letters of recommendations are probably the differentiator. How do I answer why you didn't match without sounding defensive? I feel just be honest. I think we talked about it. If you approach it as like of the more classic question of, cite a strength and cite a weakness of yourself. Like everyone has a weakness. Everyone has a deficit. I wouldn't say like not matching is your deficit, but you want to explain why, whether that's like a personality thing, whether it was like a more tangible thing like research or poor performance in on a sub-I or a few rotations. And then like answering that strength and weakness question, you want to make sure you give that twist that, this is something that's worked on, something I've actually made a strength. And you kind of prove that with your body of work over the last few months. What should I do to obtain strong letters of recommendation? Should I get most of them during my audition rotations? To be frank, you should always ask people to write a strong letter of recommendation. When you add the adjective, they will like either Navy, or they'll be like, yeah, of course. Um, Read into that as you will. Longitudinal relationships are always better. Some sub-Is only have 1 week on each service, so you only see one person maybe 2 to 3 times over the full months. Other places you have a full month with one person, which is obviously a little better. And there's ideally someone, whether you have a home institution or not, somewhere in terms of a research mentor or someone you've even interacted with slightly in the smallest way throughout medical school, and hopefully you can ask for to shadow, or if you have some free time, uh, be with them in clinic and just ex have some clinical exposure so they can speak to that as well. Because if it's just an isolated research mentor, it might be tough for them to like genuinely respond in a way to say, okay, I have confidence in him or her being a strong resident. I think that's all that I have.
We do have some in the chat. Um,
Nice.
okay, so the first one is, how do you address questions about applying for another specialty if you are dual applying for the match, like ortho and gen surge?
Yeah. So when I do applied, I even applied to places that I applied to both their ortho and their gen surge program. People say that they know, but at least for me, it was very obvious that I was applying ortho first. And it's honestly a strength of the conversation that I told them that I am still applying ortho. They ask because you have the body of your application, the ERAS remains the same for wherever all the specialties. You can change the letter of recommendations in terms of what you decide for each place, and then you can write a new personal statement. But if you list only ortho research, you list all the ortho leadership positions, and you end up in the email inbox of a prelim gen surge PD. It's not an uncommon thing, and they know very clearly. If you're doing a different specialty entirely, like a different categorical position, I think you may be forced to answer that question a little more politically. But at least for gen surge, like they're very much aware. Um, and if they like you, like they'll still want you. They'll rank you top, knowing that they might not get you. But um, a lot of places know exactly what they're getting, and they honestly, a lot of them actually like it sometimes because they may have historically had someone who didn't match an ortho and ended up being like their favorite gen surge intern or joined that program in a categorical and became their favorite resident. So it's not um, you'd be surprised how common that is. And I would just again be honest.
And this is sort of a follow-up clarification. Did you apply for two specialties at the same institution?
Um, in terms of the gen search prelim, yeah, and orthopedic categorical, yes. Uh, Gen search categorical may have been a little different. Again, just saying what your situation is. But again, it might feel a little defensive because you guys just got to say like, okay, like I am ready to take on, and I don't feel like, I've downgraded my life. Like I'm ready to, continue my life as a provider. I'm not going to wait for another year, and explain to them like, okay, I've tried it. I'm happy with the effort I put in trying to do ortho. But if it doesn't work out, I'm ready to be a surgeon, and that's what I want to be.
Okay, the next question. Are there any ways to mitigate the cost of malpractice insurance to get more opportunities to complete clinical work as a research fellow?
That's a great question that may not be fully inept to answer. But so I got lucky. I think people have like a lot of international people have to deal with that as well, which kind of sucks. There are some more affordable ways I've seen on Reddit and people brought up to me, but I really haven't no clue. Um, Bringing it up, like I know once you have the position though, bringing it up um, to some mentors, maybe something, bringing it up before, unless they clearly say no international or no one is currently enrolled or someone with malpractice insurance. Um, like I think you still should give it a fair shot in terms of accepting that position. Um, I know in general there's online scholarships across the board, like the medical student orthopedic association MOS has like a list of applications. There a lot of them are sub-eye specific, but there are some general orthopedic stuff. Um, but yeah, whether it's butting into loans if you're already on loans. It is a tough situation, um, which you can just communicate to your research mentor whether it's something that they can make a departmental kind of transaction for, so it kind of taxation. I don't know everything, but like it is a benefit to the entire department, um, or from a CME kind of funds. Rather than you just being completely transparent. Like I said before, if you don't ask, you'll never know. So just asking and just being laying your cards out there to your most trusted mentors.
Perfect. And the last question, how did you go about writing your new personal statement?
So I really liked a lot of my personal statements. So I think I did write a new personal statement, and I didn't think it was as good as my first one. So I kind of twisted a lot of my personal statement, but I'd say like 60% of it is original from my first one. You need a address not matching 100% in the personal statement. You don't need to make it like the intro or anything. It could be a sentence just within the final like wrapping up. It's like, okay, I did all this. I've shown myself to be persevering in XYZ, hiking, Kilimanjaro, saving all these pe babies, like everything. And then okay, and I also showed it by not matching and being here again, you know? So I think it should fit into the theme of it. So that's where the lot of adjustments, like I kept a lot of the stories from my first one, but changed a little bit of the theme and what I emphasized. Um, and it kind of flowed well with how I wrapped it up, which included, what I wanted it to be in the future and how not matching was, a part of my story at that point. You also have on ERAS another, it's albeit a lot smaller section to explain any gaps in your education. Um, so if it doesn't mark your research period as a leave of absence, if you delay graduation or like there's a period between edu graduation and when you would start intern year as an orthopedic resident, you can explain. You can say yes and be like, I didn't match first time, explain a little or like one or two lessons learned. You should always fill that out. Um, but again, be smart in how you say. You don't need to like bash yourself and be like, oh, I didn't do this and this and this. But just I think I did say the deans can be, not as helpful all the time with orthopedics surgery specific stuff, but I think they very much know the general mind of a director, so I think they can help you with the fine tuning of the language there.
All great questions. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to ask? All right, well, if not, we can go ahead and wrap things up. Dr. Musada, any last minute
No, that's it. I mean,
tokens of
I'm
thank you.
always
You laid it all
available.
out.
Yeah, no, I mean a lot for all the OLS members. I'm available through Slack, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. You can just, then it's the same name. Otherwise, wishing you all the best and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. See y'all at the next meeting.